Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Friday, May 26th, 2017. Oh, about 9:01 in the morning. Ready to go with our Friday show? I hope you are. I'm not quite, but we'll decide what direction we go in. It looks like a big Jared Kushner day. This may be the first time in a long time, this is almost certainly the first time in a long time that I have tried to make any prediction whatsoever about what today's show would be about. And there's still plenty of reason to believe that I may yet be sidetracked and brought down some other, I don't know what to say, some other side streets of the mind, as it were. There's plenty of things going on in the news that could distract us. We'll try and round up some of them so you are aware of them for the weekend, and we'll see what we can do about getting a Monday show together. Time is short. But what can I tell you? So are Donald Trump's fingers. So that has never handicapped him in any way that I can tell. So we'll try and roll forward and make sure we get you, let's see, your weekend fill of the news. And then, now that'll be a challenge to fill out the agenda for news chat for the weekend and wrap it all up on Monday. I don't know. Maybe we can see. We'll have to look around and see what the schedule's like. Maybe Monday could be done live. It depends. Maybe all the kids will be asleep all the way through the show anyway. I don't know. We'll see what we arrange. It's all up in the air. We're winging everything here on Kagro in the Morning, but that's okay. Donald Trump is winging the presidency, and it's not working at all. We have to give some attention to the final chapter, I guess the final chapter of Trump Shambles in its way across the Middle East and Europe. The president making his final stops. I guess, let's see, he's been in with the NATO allies and really, pretty well destroying the reputation of the United States. I think they all realize, at least the leadership there realizes this, we hope, is an aberration. Trump is an idiot, and I don't think that they can hardly believe that he's president of the United States themselves. So, hopefully they'll give us a break on some of this stuff. If you've seen any of the video of him, let's see, yesterday's video clips was him shoving his way to the front for a photo opportunity with all of the heads of, maybe they weren't all the heads of state, but all the representatives of the allied countries getting together after whatever their first confab was for a big photo shoot. And of course, because America first, Donald Trump said, I've got to be front and center, even if I'm one of the tallest people, in this photo. And he shoves out of the way with a very clever move. He's very practiced at this. You can tell. As it turns out, it was the Prime Minister of Montenegro, which made for an interesting story. Montenegro, actually, I think the most recent signatory to the North Atlantic Treaty, admitted to NATO over the objections of our friend Putin in Russia. And interesting, I don't think that if I thought Donald Trump had any idea that there was even a country called Montenegro and that was their prime minister, and that there had been tension as between them and the Russians over their joining of NATO, well, I'd be surprised. So I can't credit him for having carried out Putin's will on this one. He just wanted to get to the front. He was told that there might be an extra scoop of ice cream for the person who gets to the front the fastest. Perhaps that was it. But he had a great move in that he approached. You've seen the video by now, but I'll describe it for you in my own way. He's approaching the area where the pictures are going to be taken. He's behind a group of 4 or 5 of these other NATO leaders, and the move he makes, he lays hands on this, he puts it looks like his right hand on the shoulder and upper arm area of the Prime Minister of Montenegro, who has a name and everything. I am sure of it, and I've seen it, and there's no chance I would remember it. I mean, it was a big international incident, sort of, but on the other hand, like Trump, it's Montenegro. I don't know who that guy is. Well, anyway, the move I thought was the most impressive part. He puts the hand on there, and that's right in the spot, and he puts it on in a way that I think from the split second that you can see the facial expression on the prime minister here is he's like, oh, a person is making a gesture of familiarity here. They're putting their hand, and they want me to, stop, turn, and maybe talk to them, recognize them, speak for a moment. And he begins to turn to see, is it the president of France? Is it the chancellor of Germany? I don't think she was actually there. She was in Berlin with Barack Obama, as it turns out. And, or, some other important world leader with whom I'm friendly or looking to build a new relationship. No, it's Donald Trump. But by the time he realizes it's Trump, it's too late. Trump has already pushed his way past him. So it's not like he grabs him by the scruff of the neck and yanks him back, and it's unequivocally aggressive. It's very, it's not passive aggressive, but it's a different kind of aggressive. And, he puts the hands on there and he gets that 1 second of turn where the prime minister, isn't immediately certain that he's being screwed over. And he uses that opportunity to then squeeze by him. And then it's amazing what you can see in these split seconds as he moves past him and then steps to the spot that he thinks he should be in for a photo. And then the face turns from the smile, the fake smile, which he kind of wore again for a split second. In case the prime minister of Montenegro should turn, it should look like a friendly thing is happening. And then once I've pushed past him, away goes the fake smile. Out comes the sneer and scowl, and he starts adjusting the lapels of his jacket because this is where I'm supposed to be. Now I gotta get ready for my photo. Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for, he's ready for his close-up now that he's shoved this guy out of the way. And you can sort of see in that last split second on the face of the prime minister, I imagine what's going on, is what he appears to me to be feeling there. Like, what am I gonna do though? It's Trump. He's not going to recognize, it's not like I could say to him, hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? I mean, I know you're the president of your country, but we're all the heads of state of our country here. We don't do this kind of nonsense. What are you doing? Junior high school? Get the hell out of here. I thought you were trying to talk to me, but you're not. Now get the hell behind me where you belong. Or at least where you were. But, then he says, what am I going to do? First of all, there's no chance of getting through to this guy. Second of all, I think at that point, that's when he realizes, well, I'm Montenegro. I'm not going to be doing this sort of thing. I'm not going to get in his face. I'm just the latest victim of the way he is. It's just the way he does things. Anyway, let's see. I guess, on the off chance you haven't seen the video I'm talking about, I guess I'll make a note to myself here. After I get finished talking about everything else that happened in the world, the Trump, NATO video, and there's lots of it too. He also spoke, wow. He spoke at again, I'm skimming the news on these things. I figured I was going to try to avoid the news of what does he actually do at NATO. They were opening a new building, which may be a new NATO headquarters. And as part of it, there was also the dedication of a monument, a 9/11 monument in which they had incorporated a part, I understand, of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And so the setting for Trump's remarks was, in fact, this dedication of this new building and of this memorial. The memorial, of course, important because post 9/11 was, in fact, the first and only invocation of Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which, of course, is redundant. I'm saying the North Atlantic Treaty Organization treaty, but maybe that's not so redundant after all. Anyway, the only invocation of the Article 5 Mutual Defense Pact. This is the part, Article 5. I only know this because you see it mentioned in the newspaper accounts all the time. I have not read the treaty. We should do that. That Monday show will be reading the treaty. I will tweet the treaty. I will tweety the treaty, and then we'll all learn what's in it. But Article 5, the mutual defense, if one NATO country is attacked, it's considered an attack on all, and everybody has to come to the aid of that country that's been attacked, even if it's Montenegro. Yes, true, believe it or not. Now, anyway. So, after 9/11, of course, every member of NATO apparently did, in fact, commit combat troops. And I believe everybody actually suffered losses of their combat troops in Afghanistan or Iraq. Was Iraq actually? I mean, I think there were certainly NATO troops there, but I don't know if that was another NATO action per se. But anyway, Afghanistan certainly was. And, for the first time somebody actually needed NATO, and it was us, and we put out the call, and they answered. And now, of course, Donald Trump has campaigned on NATO is obsolete, NATO is terrible, I hate NATO. One of the reasons I hate NATO is everybody else in it is cheapskates. We pay for everything, and all these other countries are way behind on their dues, their contributions to NATO. Now that's disputed by people on Earth. That I guess he is one of a very small number of people who actually believe that this is the case. I've seen it explained elsewhere that this simply is not the case, and that it pains the other members to no end to be reminded that Donald Trump and other dummies believe this because it's stupid and insulting. So here he is at the 9/11 memorial, which is also kind of a memorial to, or a recognition of, the power of the treaty, the validity of the treaty of Article 5, mutual self-defense. And only one country has ever made that call. It was the United States. They received the assistance of every member nation. And here at the dedication of a memorial to that triggering event comes Donald Trump to say, first of all, I was thankful for I loved 9/11 because, of course, it made my building in 40 Wall Street the tallest building in Lower Manhattan, which I don't even think is actually true. But anyway, you'll recall that he said that on television, like a few days or even one day after the attack? I don't even remember. It was something gross. It was while he was flying a plane into the World Trade Center. He called Fox and Friends and said that. I think that's the actual story. Anyway, could be wrong about that one, but at this dedication of this building, he also, by the way, had some criticisms of the new headquarters building. I don't know what it cost, but it was too much probably. I could have gotten it for like 15% off at minimum, but it's a beautiful building, even though it's not gold. And so he spent the speech excoriating the rest of the allies who were the ones who ponied up at the request of the United States, and there he is to complain. It wasn't enough. It's terrible. You're all awful. I hate you guts. Hope you drop dead. Screw you and America. Woo. F yeah. So anyway, that's an international embarrassment. That was not very good. All right. Let's see. As a matter of fact, we'll follow up on that one with a piece from Der Spiegel, because Greg is constantly telling us what Der Spiegel is saying, and I think he just likes saying Spiegel. By the way, is there a mixed breed of puppy that would be called a Spiegel? What did I ran into the other day? A Puggle. I don't know much about dogs or dog breeds, but these cross breeds that they mix the names up, I think, are hilarious. So we met a Puggle, and then somebody else, we theorized the Schnoodle the other day, but I figured that had to exist already. And in fact it did, the Schnauzer Poodle, but I guess the poodle thing is very popular for these crosses. I don't know whether it makes a fun, nice kind of dog, or it just sounds funny and people like it. But, maybe there's something out there that we can find out if that's a dog breed, a Spiegel. Let's see, a Beagle and a what? I need a Sp. So, all right. Or maybe it could be at least three things in there. A little poodle, a Schnauzer, poodle, Beagle, Spiegel. Spiegel Online. Der Spiegel has this to say: a danger to the world, not Spiegel, but it's time to get rid of Donald Trump. What do we care about what Klaus Brinkbaumer at Der Spiegel has to say about we got to get rid of our president? Ordinarily, we take that as a great insult, except in this case, I think I have to agree. It probably is time to get rid of him. Let's see. Kate Cheryl is sending me something. Is there a Spiegel out there? Is a Spiegel? Yes. Okay. An English Spiegel. Thank you. I knew there was an answer for this out there somewhere. A mix of a English toy spaniel and a beagle. Doesn't have to be, I guess, a toy spaniel. I guess it could be any kind of a spaniel, but I don't know why I didn't think of SP, spaniel. There's some really good looking ones out there. That one looks like it's, over there. It looks like, let me click on this one. It looks like it's, like there's some Bernese mountain dog, at least the coloration in this one. I don't know how they got that, but it's another one of these Spiegels, which is not Schmeagol from the Lord of the Rings, by the way. That's a very different thing. There's Schmeagol, that's up there at the images too. Spiegel, a magazine and a cross between a spaniel, any kind of spaniel, I guess. And, I don't know. Maybe I should stay with the authoritative definition of English toy spaniel, but I don't know why that should be the case. I think any kind of spaniel could spaniel and beagle, very cute. Keep up the good work out there, you crazy dog breeders. Give us something good. Yeah, and Rebecca just suggested the same thing. People who are up on their dog breeds. That's what I needed this morning. I should have let you know earlier. All right. I think there was something important here. Yes, the international disgrace of Donald Trump and our need to be rid of him. Under instructions from the Germans on this one, who got the worst of it, I think, in this speech, if I remember correctly, that, I don't know, we got to get some context on how it was that he came around to calling the Germans evil. I think he was mad about their cars, that they were manufacturing, that America was buying so many German German manufactured cars, but as other people have pointed out, the bulk of these car bodies are put together in the United States. But whatever, they're German name brands, and I don't know, they're pretty good cars. But I guess I did see somebody commenting he's more put out by German manufactured automobiles than he has been about I don't know, either terrorist attacks on the United States or whatever else. I mean, apparently this disturbs him to no end. Anyway. The Germans say it's time to get rid of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has transformed the United States into a laughingstock, and he is a danger to the world. He must be removed from the White House before things get even worse. There is an article that follows that, although I think we've got the gist of it here. But let's read to see if it gets any funnier. Though he is German. Well, Donald Trump is not fit to be president of the United States. That is hilarious. He does not possess the requisite intellect and does not understand the significance of the office he holds, nor the tasks associated with it. He doesn't read, he doesn't bother to peruse important files and intelligence reports, and knows little about the issues that he has identified as his priorities. His decisions are capricious, and they are delivered in the form of tyrannical decrees. He is a man free of morals, as has been demonstrated hundreds of times. He is a liar, a racist, and a cheat. I feel ashamed to use these words, as sharp and loud as they are, but if they apply to anyone, they apply to Trump. And one of the media's tasks is to continue telling things as they are. Trump has to be removed from the White House quickly. He is a danger to the world. Trump is a miserable politician. He fired the FBI director simply because he could. James Comey has gotten under his skin with his investigation into Trump's confidants, that would be. Comey has also refused to swear loyalty and fealty to Trump and to abandon the investigation. He had to go. Trump is also a miserable boss. His people invent excuses for him and lie on his behalf because they have to. But then Trump wakes up and posts tweets that contradict what they have said. He doesn't care that his spokesman, his Secretary of State, and his National Security Advisor had just denied that the president had handed Russia, of all countries, sensitive intelligence gleaned from Israel, of all countries. Trump tweeted, yes, I did, because I can. I'm president, after all. Nothing is as it should be in this White House. Everyone working there has been compromised multiple times, and now they all despise each other, and everyone except for Trump despises Trump. Because of all that, and he may be a self-hating Trump. I don't really know. Because of all that, after just 120 days of the Trump administration, we are witness to an American tragedy for which there are 5 theoretical solutions. Wow. All right. Just 5? Okay. The first is Trump's resignation, which won't happen. The second is that Republicans in the House and Senate support impeachment, which would be justified by the president's proven obstruction of justice, but won't happen because of the Republicans' thirst for power, which they won't willingly give up. The third possible solution is the invocation of the 25th Amendment, which would require the cabinet to declare Trump unfit to discharge the powers of the presidency. That isn't particularly likely either. Fourth, the Democrats get ready to fight and win back majorities in the House and Senate in midterm elections, which are 18 months away, before they can pursue option 2, impeachment. Fifth, the international community wakes up and finds a way to circumvent the White House and free itself of its dependence on the U.S. Unlike the preceding 4 options, the fifth doesn't directly solve the Trump problem, but it is nevertheless necessary and possible. Not quite 2 weeks ago, a number of experts and politicians focused on foreign policy, a number of experts and politicians focused on foreign policy met in Washington at the invitation of the Munich Security Conference. They should have met in Munich. It wasn't difficult to sense the atmosphere of chaos and agony that has descended upon the city. The U.S. elected a laughing stock to the presidency and has now made itself dependent on a joke of a man. Woo! The country is, as David Brooks wrote recently in the New York Times over a salad at Applebee's, dependent on a child. The Trump administration has no foreign policy because Trump has consistently promised American withdrawal while invoking America's strength. He has promised both no wars and more wars. He makes decisions according to his mood with no strategic coherence or tactical logic. Moscow and Beijing are laughing at America. Elsewhere, people are worried. In the Pacific, warships and submarines, we found out, American and Chinese, circle each other in close proximity. The conflict with North Korea is escalating. Who can be certain that Donald Trump won't risk nuclear war simply to save his own skin? Efforts to stop climate change are in trouble, and many expect the U.S. to withdraw from the Paris Agreement because Trump is wary of, I'm being distracted by my phone, which I'm not going to answer, wary of legally binding measures of any kind, I guess. Crises, including those in Syria and Libya, are escalating but no longer being discussed. And who should they be discussed with? Phone calls and emails to the United States State Department go unanswered. Nothing is regulated, nothing is stable, and the transatlantic relationship hardly exists anymore. German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel and Bundestag Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Norbert Röttgen fly back and forth, but Germany and the U.S. no longer understand each other. Hardly any real communication takes place. There are no joint foreign policy goals, and there is no strategy. In Game of Thrones, the Mad King was murdered, and the child that later took his place was no better. In real life, an immature boy sits on the throne of the most important country in the world. He could, at any time, issue a catastrophic order that would immediately be carried out. They think. Anyway, that is why the parents cannot afford to take their eyes off him for even a second. They cannot succumb to exhaustion because he is so taxing. They ultimately have to send him to his room and return power to the grown-ups. Well, that's quite a piece. Good job, Spiegel. There's more out there. Let's see. Other things that we need to, do we catch up on some of the other things that have been said about Trump lately, or even a couple weeks ago? There was another rash of anti-Trump opinion pieces. Or do we push on? There was another little bit that I want to throw in there. I thought the tweet from a tweet from John Aravosis really summed things up. He was playing off a tweet of Jennifer Jacobs. Let me grab that. Jennifer Jacobs, by way of filling in background here, is the White House reporter for Bloomberg News. She had tweeted, Trump denied. You recall that he sat down and met with newly elected French President Macron yesterday, and they had the handshake incident and the whole thing. And by the way, I took a look at the video of the handshake, and it's not nearly as dramatic as the stills made it look. Stills can sometimes put too much emphasis on those frozen moments that are so fleeting. I don't think he really got his hand squashed that bad, but at least he didn't get to pull his handshake game, Trump. Anyway, so he met with Macron, and Trump tells Macron, he says, Jennifer Jacobs writes, he denied support for the National Front's Le Pen in France's election. You were my guy, he told Macron today, French officials say. And John, quite correctly, just says, what an embarrassment. What is he even doing? Macron must think he's a total lunatic. And he must at this point, because I don't even know what to say. I mean, I was going to say, well, nothing could have been more obvious, but he was explicit in saying, I believe, maybe I remember it wrong, but certainly it was at the very least strongly implied that he was pulling hard for Le Pen, and everybody expected that. Nobody, thankfully nobody expected her to win, and she didn't. And okay, at least you could say, well, he's playing the international diplomacy game, except he's, it's played in a different way. First of all, you don't say anything at all about the election so that you're in a position to say, hey, congratulations, looking forward to working with you. And you don't have to say, I was pulling for you all along, or even lie about it, because it was none of your business in the first place. I don't know. But of course he ruined that. And so instead he just lies to the guy. And I mean, he's just, now you got the French president sitting there and saying, this demented effing idiot thinks I believe that. What are we going to do with this moron? I don't even know. All right. Well, anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. And I was, interested to learn it. I guess The Hill has somewhat more detail on that. Is there anything else besides that? Is there any other quotes of consequence? Nah, not really. Congratulated Macron on his tremendous victory. Tremendos, which I'm sure he said, of course, in his own way. Tremendous victory that you had. It was terrific. Not quite as tremendous as mine, but almost as nice, I'm sure. I went to the Western Wall and I did. It was fantastic. Nothing like it in history. Man, I don't even know, what else are we gonna bring up here? Might as well, you know what, I wanna just run over to the Jared Kushner side of things. I mentioned in the Morning Post today, I just think we're running out of time to catch up on what the hell's going on with Jared Kushner. And I think this will be a hell of a weekend, and he just might not be around when we get back on the weekend. All right. So, but before I do that, one last thing that I wanted to toss in there. Kate Sherrill had yesterday sent me this thread. I now see it being shared widely. You will have seen it too, many of you. And if you haven't, you will see it, I'm sure, by the end of the day. I will now guarantee that by bringing it up. It is the thread yesterday, authored by Yashar Ali, a New York Magazine, writer, also credits here in, GQ, Mother Jones, HuffPost as well. And, he shares this story, in a, 14, 15 piece tweet storm. The important stuff is up at the top here. Trump NATO meeting reminds me of a story I was never authorized to share until now. We're being authorized. That does sound dramatic, doesn't it? Friday is a terrific day for sound effects. Trump NATO meeting reminds me of a story I was never authorized to share until now. His first call with the Prime Minister of Denmark last year. You recall that period in between the election and the inauguration where there's a flurry of phone calls with world leaders, and it continued after the inauguration as well. But initially, no one was able to get a hold of him. No one knew how to reach him, and they didn't know how to reach anybody. And it was basically a matter of, did you know his cell phone number? If you could get his cell phone number, you could speak to Trump. And there was all kinds of security issues with that, but that's not what this is about. So there's a little bit in there about that. All right, so here we go. This story was shared with me in December and confirmed by two high-level sources. After the election, it was widely reported that world leaders had a difficult time reaching Trump. Normally, calls with foreign leaders and the president or president-elect, are arranged with the State Department. He includes here an email from Ambassador Susan Rice sent to John Podesta explaining process. I'm not sure what the direct relevance here is, but I guess this was to illustrate what would have happened had what everyone expected to happen in the election have happened. I've lost track of the happening. In other words, had Hillary Clinton won, this email from Ambassador Rice to Podesta explains the mechanics of how you begin to make those leader-to-leader calls in preparation for the transition. And without reading you the text of the email. Suffice to say, there's a whole process. The State Department briefs you on who you're talking to, what to expect. You brief the other side about what they should expect. There's protocol, there's things you talk about, things you don't talk about, and there's even the mechanics of where do you make the phone calls so that your call is secure, and you have translators available if necessary. And they forego all of this because they didn't think they were going to win. And then once they did, the Trump camp doesn't think process makes any sense. Why? I'm a doer. I get things done. I'm an executive guy. I want to talk to somebody on the phone. Give me a phone. That's it. That's all there is to it for him. Anyway, so the Prime Minister of Denmark, the Prime Minister's office finally tracks someone down that knows how to get a hold of Trump. That is, they've got his cell phone number, and the call is arranged and made. President-elect Trump is on the call with the Prime Minister of Denmark, and he mentions, Trump does, that his daughter-in-law, one of them, Vanessa Trump, is of Danish descent. Interesting. Like, I might bring that up too. We have a special affinity for Denmark. I mean, it's big words, but, we love Denmark. Denmark is awesome. It's almost all, traditionally all white. It's terrific. I like that. It's not always the case anymore, but, you do what you can. I'm sure that's the kind of dumb stuff he's blurting out. But by the way, one of my daughters-in-law, Vanessa, she is of Danish descent. Vanessa is a huge name in Denmark, isn't it? Anyway, Trump then, this is where it starts to get weird. Okay, that's nice. Wonderful, right? I mean, what else are you going to say? These are supposed to be pleasantries. I have a daughter-in-law who's part Danish, and I'm sure, by the way, it's like 4 generations back, but okay, so she's part Danish. Maybe she was born in Denmark. I don't know. He runs out of things to say. I love Danish. Your cookies are fantastic. The ones that come in around the tin. I used to love those. The ones that were shaped like pretzels were always interesting to me because the giant sugar crystals on them were reminiscent of salt crystals, and you were expecting the salted because it's pretzel shaped and it has salt on top. But then it was sugar and it was sweet and it was just so very good, just so amazing. Everyone loved it. Was like as delicious as Yad Vashem. It was fantastic. I loved your cookies. Just can't wait to, whatever. So, but he does more than this. This is the funny part. Okay, so his daughter-in-law is of Danish descent. Then Trump immediately, because he's on his cell phone, he conferences this daughter-in-law, Vanessa, in. He's, hold on a minute there, Denmark. I'm going to bring my daughter-in-law in here. I told you she was of Danish descent, so she's going to have something to say. Well, I'm curious about what did she have to say. If anything, she was probably like, no, don't. I wonder if she calls him Dad or Donald, or what do you think she calls him? Dad, Dad, that's ridiculous. I don't need to be in on this call. But get this. So Trump conferences his daughter-in-law into the call with the Prime Minister of Denmark. Now, the Prime Minister was not warned or briefed in advance, and I guess that's a big protocol breach, but I'm sure that he handles it with aplomb and says, good to meet you, Vanessa. Maybe he tried saying, how are you in Danish to see if she could answer him or something like that. Then Trump says, though, just to make it, this could be interesting, pleasantry, light discussion, but just to make it crap again, Trump says to his daughter-in-law, I'm on the phone with the King of Denmark. The King of, just as a reminder, this is the Prime Minister of Denmark. Yashar writes it this way. Reminder, he's on the phone with the Prime Minister of Denmark, and Denmark doesn't have a king. They have a monarch, true. Queen Margrethe II is the head of state. He includes a picture of her later on in the tweet storm. I don't know that was absolutely necessary, but here's a picture of Lars Rasmussen is the Prime Minister. Queen Margrethe and Prince Henrik are also pictured here. They look like lovely monarchs, fantastic people, I'm sure. Terrific, lots of gold. I'd love to talk to them, but that's not who's on the phone now. I'm on the phone with the King of Denmark. And she gets, I wonder what she said. Hi, King. Good talking. Nice to meet you. Now, he goes on to say, some may say this is a bunch of European whiny behavior, but titles are really, really important to European leaders, and as others pointed out in response to everyone. Only a handful of these calls with world leaders have gotten out. Some see it as a big deal. Others think it's trivial, but it speaks to a larger issue that's plaguing the Trump White House right now. because the Trump transition wasn't prepped for a victory. They didn't have briefings prepped for foreign leader calls. They didn't arrange to have the State Department arrange these calls. Again, a reminder of how much work goes into it from the Ambassador Rice email, showing off all the capabilities of the State Department to make these calls happen smoothly and mean something when they do. Lack of prep, he says, has also led to key roles not being filled in various departments. There have only been a handful of ambassadors appointed. And this has certainly hurt our relationships and our foreign policy. You can set policy the way you want to, but prep has to be uniform. Michael Musson's comment on this. Also love the Hamlet. Alas, poor Robert Urich. I figured that Hamlet would come up, but you know how I figured it was coming up? In my mind, it comes up with cause you remember the phone call with, Duterte and Trump says, how's everybody in the Philippines? Because he doesn't know what else to say. I imagine he says, how's everything in Denmark? And maybe the prime minister, thinking he's making a joke, says, well, there's nothing rotten. And Trump saying, that's good. You don't want any smell or anything. Oh, I was making a reference to Shakespeare. Shakespeare is from Denmark? No, he references Denmark. Do you know the play Hamlet? Omelet? Is that what you mean? Eggs? No, Hamlet, the Shakespeare play. Oh, yeah, okay. He doesn't speak English. I don't think it's his first language. He's thinking of Romeo and Juliet. Anyway, that's great. Listen, my daughter-in-law wants to say something. So who knows? I'd love to see the readout of the rest of that thing. We could spend the rest of the day on it, but we won't. I swear I'm going to get to Jared Kushner. Let's see. One last thing, by the way. Rebecca Romans, she's an actual legitimate dog breeder. Don't forget that, right? I think we actually did know that. As a legitimate dog breeder of purebred dogs, I call foul on breeders who profit on mutts passed off as breeds. Yeah, that's probably true. I don't know how to feel about that exactly. Like, I guess, I mean, I don't know. Do they sell them for less? Does that count? Does that make any difference? Like if you give somebody what do they have? Cockadoodle. Right? Do they have that? It's real, right? Cocker Spaniel and a poodle. I know there's well, what was the other? There's all kind who knows? The poodle seems to be the favorite thing for this. But why? Oh, I don't know. I understand the purebred dog thing, and that's important, and they have the competitions and all that, and people like the very certain breeds. I like the experimentation and all that, but I don't know. So does the dog breeders, do they charge as much for a snickerdoodle or whatever the hell as they would for the pure breeds, or do they discount that in some way, or is it they might charge even more? It's crazy. I just made this thing up in a lab. I don't know. I don't think I can get to the politics of that. Rebecca, you can record a segment for us on that one and straighten us out. It would make some great Friday material. So would Jared Kushner, if I could just get to that. Let's see. Last thing I guess I'll say before we begin the Jared Kushner marathon. Greg Gianforte, the body slam guy, as expected, won in Montana. And that's it. I mean, everybody kind of expected that he would win. They had to spend a lot more money, and it was a closer race than it usually is in Montana. Long shot for Quist to begin with. I think we got, that's that it is what it is. I don't know. We would have David Neer come on here and tell us the nitty-gritty details, except that was all available already at the Daily Kos. So let's go elsewhere, shall we? Kushner. Last night, the news was, and Twitter was aflame with the news that he was, in fact, now, how do they put it? He's not quite a person of interest. He's not the subject of an investigation, but the investigations, multiple investigations over at the FBI. We don't know yet about what Mueller is doing and whether he's going to include them, but the investigations, we had heard the hints the other day that a figure inside the White House close to Trump was also now being looked at. Everybody speculated that it was Jared Kushner, and it is. Phew. So, how do we start to round this stuff up. I'm just going to scroll down and read it out as we find the things, probably in reverse chronological order, and see if we can't fill in the blanks here. We got the Washington Post. Aaron Blake has this piece from the Fix HQ. The investigation of Jared Kushner fits a very troubling pattern. This will probably be the best roundup. That way we can get the most general news fit in on this one. Jared Kushner has just been revealed as the senior White House advisor who is under investigation in the Russia probe, which is news that comes as little surprise. Indeed, when the Washington Post reported last week that an then unnamed top Trump advisor was a focus, many quickly assumed it was Kushner. But while those assumptions were based on his known contacts with Russians and his status as one of the few senior White House aides, there's another reason his naming fits the puzzle. He's related to Trump. Kushner's ability to even work in the White House has been the subject of plenty of debate because he is Trump's son-in-law. Kushner has made concessions to try and avoid violating a federal anti-nepotism law, including foregoing a paycheck. And a big reason anti-nepotism laws exist is to avoid the corruption that all too often comes with installing your relatives in positions of power. As any expert on corrupt authoritarian regimes throughout history will tell you, those regimes' wrongdoing will often run through family members with official titles, because it's easier to get them to do it and not turn you in, basically. You know, you can go looking for, as he did the other day, Mike Rogers and Dan Coates to help you out all day long, and they're not nearly as likely to do it as family members, so that's why you make family members government officials. That's really why you're not supposed to, but that's why you would if you were an authoritarian. Anyway, this is reminding me of 100 other things, but this is a good general roundup. It isn't clear what possible crimes might be under investigation. And it's important to emphasize that Kushner hasn't been charged with anything. We don't know where this will lead, if anywhere. But here's a key part of the Post's story, and it's quoted here. In addition to possible coordination between the Kremlin and the Trump campaign to influence the 2016 presidential election, investigators are also looking broadly into possible financial crimes. But the people familiar with the matter, who were not authorized to speak publicly, did not specify who or what was being examined. In other words, this isn't just about whether Kushner or anyone else facilitated collusion with Russia during the 2016 campaign. Indeed, the two meetings he had with Russians that have been spotlighted actually came in December after Trump was elected. Federal investigators appear to be cluing in some other potential crimes that may or may not be related to that. Here I'll just pause to say, yes, among the other things that has been pointed out or have been pointed out in the last couple of days, Kushner failing to disclose a couple of meetings with Russian operatives. We all kind of knew about that. Of course, Jeff Sessions had done the same. Many people did the same, but he did the same thing too. Kushner, and in many cases, he coordinated those meetings. In addition, it now turns out that he has failed to disclose something in the neighborhood of $1 billion worth of loans that he's gotten, or his family's businesses have gotten over the years, which is also super important. And as I understand it, he also had some secret and undisclosed meetings with the head of a Russian bank that is considered to be controlled by Vladimir Putin. It may have been one of the banks under sanction from the United States. It's suspected in money laundering cases, and gee whiz, he never disclosed the fact that he met with them, and maybe even some of those loans come from there. I say maybe because, again, we have yet to read over all of the record here, and we'll try and enter as much of it into the record for you before the weekend as possible. Kushner met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, and then with Sergei Gorkov, here we are, the head of Vneshekonom Bank. Remember, I think we actually, and that's that ridiculous name for a bank, which is not ridiculous in Russian at all, but it's just tough for us to have to pronounce it. It's a very plain name for a bank, I think, in Russian. But that name has come up before, and it's come up in the context of our money laundering discussions over the past couple of days. And again, I remind you that we did hear the other day that Rachel Maddow just for some reason never really connected the Trump-Russia stuff with the Russian money laundering the way we did. And it was speculative for us, but it seemed to make a great deal of sense. And now this all begins to converge in officialdom, the way these investigations are going. Anyway, Kushner meets with Sergei Gorkov, the head of the Vnesheconombank, which faced U.S. sanctions, as I mentioned, after Russia's annexation of Crimea. Beyond that, there aren't many details. If it does lead down a path to corruption allegations, though, there will be plenty of I told you so's. You've seen it in countries all over the world where they've appointed family members, whether it's their son, daughter, in-laws. It provides for tremendous opportunities for corruption. Tremendous opportunities. I love it. Shruti Shah, an international corruption expert at Coalition for Integrity, told HuffPost last month. People who want to curry favor find their way to provide favors to family members as a way of getting closer to the person in power. Added Gerald Firestein, although now I guess we're all saying Stein, a former top State Department official and ambassador to Yemen in the Obama administration. He said, for many countries and governments, certainly in the Gulf, where they just were, in the Middle East, where Israel is, as you know, they would recognize this pattern immediately. I think that they would find it completely normal that leaders mix personal business interests with government affairs and would use family members in various official responsibilities. That's true, of course, because it is a hereditary monarchy, and Saudi Arabia in particular is, of course, a large estate masquerading as a country. Now, that's not to say that they're not entitled to national status, but as you know, I keep pointing this out, it's better to think of Saudi Arabia as Saud-Alago than anything else, not just because of their Trumpishness, but because they own the place and it's organized in the form of a nation state because that's the way the rest of the world, the Western world, I should say, really has organized itself. And then really since, the late 1800s has pretty much insisted that any place that won't allow itself to be owned by a Western nation as a colony should organize itself in Western nation-state fashion. You don't even have a flag, we can't talk to you. Get yourself a flag, a national anthem, draw some borders, get a military uniform, and elect a president or whatever. You can still use a monarch if you want to, but there's got to be order here. You can't organize yourself as a nation state any other way. So the Saudis said, fine, we got a king. We need to have a foreign minister. You, brother. And, it's not like it's something we're not used to. It's just, it's a form of government we abandoned a while ago as, for whatever reason, whether we thought it was primitive or stupid or what have you, or it was just prone to problems. I mean, we don't have it in American history, but our American history by extension, we include, English and Western European history as part of our white people's history heritage anyway. So if you studied any of that or you watch television, like me and Donald Trump, you learn that way. But the hereditary monarchies, that wasn't an odd thing. Oh, my brother will be foreign minister, just as my brother will be, Duke of York. This other one will be the Duke of whatever else. There were royal dukes of everything. And people got, commissioned in the armed forces that way. Are you, you want to be an admiral? Are you a great sailor? No. Have you ever sailed? No. Well, why don't we make you Lord of the Admiralty anyway, because you're my brother-in-law, and things worked that way for hundreds of years in Western Europe. And now look at us. We're fantastic and drive Mercedes-Benzes all over the place. Surely, surely the same will work in Saudi Arabia. Maybe not. Anyway, at least they now power our Mercedes anyhow. Kushner, back to the articles, people who have organized their thoughts. Kushner has already come under scrutiny for his family, possibly benefiting personally from his proximity to the leader of the free world father-in-law. His sister, earlier this month, mentioned Kushner's advisory role in the White House while pitching Chinese investors on a New Jersey housing development, for which he would sell them green cards. Remember that story? Former Obama administration ethics counsel Norman Eisen was among those criticizing that move. So was the rest of the world. Here's what Eisen said back in December when Kushner's potential role in the Trump White House first made news. The problem with it is it sends a message that if you want to have influence in the administration, do it through the kids. And there's a tradition. This is not the first time this has happened. I'm just shocked it's happened in the United States. It's possible that Kushner's familial relationship with Trump is part of the reason he's been subjected to more scrutiny than any other White House advisor in this probe. And as emphasized above, we have no idea what will come of this, but if scrutiny of Kushner becomes more intense and there appears to be some validity to it, it will reinforce a central reason why ethics experts say these kinds of arrangements are to be avoided in the first place. I'll also remind you why the official role for Ivanka should be avoided in the first place. We have those situations come up every once in a while where we end up having to criticize Ivanka for ineffectively chastising her father when he's completely wrong. And people say, well, come on. I mean, you know, you're treating her like just some random White House aide who is supposed to stand up to the president, but she's defending her father. You got to recognize the familial relationship here. And we do. I understand it, but that's the problem. She shouldn't be in this role where part of the job is to say no to the president when he needs someone to advise that the answer is no, even if they ultimately overrule them. Somebody has to stand up and say it. But you're not going to say it because, come on, he's your dad, and you don't have that kind of relationship. I know. You have a father-daughter relationship, and that makes it tough to do a job, a real legitimate job in the White House, helping the president think critically. So that's why you should not have that job. There could be other people who could do it, but of course, he's not somebody who likes to have people around him who will tell him no. All right, and he doesn't have any. Okay, so other Kushner articles that need to be entered on the record. There's lots going on. I told you that he's under investigation for not having, or they're interested in his not having declared his meetings with the Russians, not having declared certain loans that he took. All of that, very true and all very interesting. But there's other stuff out there that we should catch up on him, regarding him. All right, let's see. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Here is the original Washington Post declaration that he was a subject of the investigation. That came out, I think, a little bit before Aaron Blake's piece here. Let me just make sure that there's no detail we're missing here. This is Matt Zapotowski, Sari Horowitz, Devlin Barrett, and Adam Entus on this piece. Didn't we talk about Adam Entus? Wasn't he writing from Europe the other day? Investigators are focusing on a series of meetings held by Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law and an influential White House advisor, as part of their probe. Kushner, who held meetings in December with the Russian ambassador and a banker from Moscow, thank God they don't make me say his name right now, is being investigated because of the extent and nature of his interactions with the Russians, people said. The Washington Post reported last week that senior White House official close to the president, a senior official, was a significant focus in the high-stakes investigation. Didn't name Kushner. FBI agents also remain keenly interested in former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, of course, and former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort. But Kushner is the only current White House official known to be considered a key person in the probe. The Post has not been told that Kushner is a target or a central focus of the investigation, and he's not been accused of any wrongdoing. Target is a word that generally refers to someone who is the main suspect of investigators' attention, though prosecutors can and do bring charges against people who are not marked with that distinction, so it's not out of the question. Mr. Kushner previously volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings. He will do the same if he's contacted in connection with any other inquiry, said Jamie Gorelick, one of his attorneys. Remember that? In addition to possible coordination with the Kremlin and the Trump campaign to influence the election, investigators are also looking into financial crimes, right? We read that segment. Sarah Isgur Flores, a Justice Department spokeswoman, said, I can't confirm or deny the existence or non-existence of investigations or subjects of investigations. The FBI declined to comment. At the time of the December meetings, Trump had already won the election. Contacts between people on a transition team and foreign governments can be routine, but the meetings and phone calls with the Russians were not made public at the time. In early December, Kushner met in New York with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, and later sent a deputy to meet with Kislyak. There's also, of course, talk of his having smuggled him into Trump Tower, although I don't know if that's mentioned in this piece. But that's a weird thing to do, too. And he smuggled him in his pants, which is, like I said, an amazing thing. Amazing feat, really. Kislyak's not a small guy. Flynn was also present at the early December meeting, by the way, and later that month, Flynn held a call with Kislyak to discuss U.S.-imposed sanctions against Russia. Flynn initially mischaracterized that conversation, even to Vice President Pence, ultimately prompting his ouster from the White House. Kushner also met in December with Gorkov, who we mentioned, the bank president. In addition to the December meetings, a former senior intelligence official said FBI agents have been looking closely at earlier exchanges between Trump associates and the Russians dating to the spring of 2016, including one at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington. Kushner and Kislyak, along with close Trump advisor and current Attorney General Jeff Sessions, were present at an April 2016 event at the Mayflower, we've mentioned this, where then-candidate Trump promised in a speech to seek better relations with Russia. Unclear whether Kushner and Kislyak interacted there. The New York Times reported Kushner omitted from security clearance forms his December meetings with Kislyak and Gorkov, though his attorney said that was a mere error, and he told the FBI soon after that he would amend those forms. The White House said that his meetings were normal and inconsequential. Did he, by the way, follow up and amend his forms? I don't think so. In many ways, Kushner is a unique figure inside the White House. He is arguably the president's most trusted advisor. He's also a close member of the president's family. His policy responsibility is vast. His foreign policy portfolio alone includes Canada and Mexico, China, peace in the Middle East, etc. Yet he rarely speaks publicly about any of them. Yet he keeps his spokesperson on the payroll, by the way. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller, now leading the probe into possible coordination between the Kremlin and the Trump campaign, and he's set up shop in the Patrick Henry building in downtown D.C. Even before he was picked by the Deputy Attorney General to take over the case, investigators had been stepping up their efforts, issuing subpoenas and looking to conduct interviews. People familiar with the matter said. A small group of lawmakers known as the Gang of Eight was recently notified of the change in tempo and focus in the investigation at a classified briefing. So, is there more? Is there other interesting stuff in this piece? This I think we can be done with. Let's move on to some other background, which at the moment is not the subject of the federal investigation, but which is getting a lot of attention in the news and tells us a lot, I think, about Kushner, who he is, where he comes from, what he's like. Because remember, he spent the first couple of months as, isn't it great? Jared Kushner and Ivanka are here to be the moderating influences in the Trump White House. It turns out, though, that he's very much more of a mini-me than, for Trump, than we first realized. Of course, we knew that he had, quote unquote, made his fortune in real estate. And then, of course, we realized, some of that fortune is being made by selling green cards for $500,000 apiece. And we immediately began to suspect that maybe this real estate empire, maybe all real estate empires are kind of like this. So if his fits the pattern, I guess it's not unusual in any sense, but it's unusual in the sense that most of us sitting here doing our own regular jobs and not making $1 billion frequently look at this stuff and say, I certainly get the general sense that something terrible is going on behind the scenes here. You don't, it's as much opportunity as there is in the United States of America, greatest country in the world, by the way, to make $1 billion, you've got to know by now that unless you've invented something extraordinary or have the, exclusive rights to marketing something extraordinary that everybody wants, if you're not making something and selling millions of units of it, amassing $1 billion doesn't often happen without theft, essentially, whether it's legalized theft or whatever. I mean, it's either outright just grabbing money and running with it, or let's say doing something untoward with other people's money and then holding on to it and winning in court, or using the courts to pry money out of other people's hands. That's what we're getting at here. Both ProPublica and who else did this? It was the New York Times have spent considerable time, and I don't know whether did they work together, the Times and ProPublica, in putting this together, or are they separate reports? They're both on the same thing, though. ProPublica's piece is called "The Beleaguered Tenants of Kushnerville," but I think that might be a follow-up piece to this one here in the New York Times called "Jared Kushner's Other Real Estate Empire." We know about Jared Kushner's high-profile stuff, the Kushner family project in Jersey City, the one for which they were selling green cards as investment tokens. Instead of a tote bag when you donate, you get a green card. That's basically what's going on. But like the Trumps, I mean, Trump is now known for the flashy real estate stuff, the hotels and the Golden Towers and everything. But originally, of course, his dad and his grandfather before, had much more humble beginnings. But his dad made his real fortune in low and moderate income housing, rental units, etc., in the outer boroughs. And it was only Donald Trump who refocused the company on losing money by being flashier. But the Kushners, same thing. They make their billions of dollars not so much on starting out by saying, we're going to build the most fantastic office buildings ever or condo units ever, and we're just going to make money that way. I mean, that's the popular myth, just like, and I guess it's facilitated by stories about people who invent something awesome. Spanx comes to mind, right? I mean, just in terms of, I don't know how awesome Spanx are. A lot of people swear by them, but the point is that it was a thing that didn't exist, that needed to exist, that was invented by somebody who was otherwise a regular person and just sold a bazillion of them and became a billionaire. And we think of all of our billionaires that way, even if they're doing stuff like, okay, I invented a hedge fund and then stole 10% of everybody's money. That's inventive, sorta. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily count that as, working your way up the ladder and becoming a billionaire. But then there's this kind of billionaireism too, which is just what we think is happening in these glamorous real estate stories is, I just build the most fantastic things. I mean, I happen to think that they're crap, they're ugly, and I don't like the Trump style. But some people love the lavish, overdone, overdecorated crap. And if he just builds one of those things and rich people can't help themselves but throw $1 million, $2 million, $3 million at him to get one of these units, well, okay, that's how he becomes a billionaire. But it's not how he became a billionaire. How did he get the money to make these buildings, Kushner or Trump or whatever? It's from years and years, decades of chiseling people through low income stuff. I can get the money together through bank loans to build low rise, low income housing, and then people will move in and they have to pay me rent. And then I can screw them on a bunch of other things too and make even more money. And then I can have enough dollars to convince a big bank to give me the real money that I need to build one of these giant towers. It's not a matter of them saying, I just build the biggest and bestest luxury condo as you work your way up the ladder. We forget that. Anyway, here's the background on that. Jared Kushner's Other Real Estate Empire. And they too use lots of illustrations here of the kind of the very people that they screwed so badly, in addition to just being, the landlord who collects rent and is the butt of all jokes because you got to pay him all the time. And then I think ProPublica expands on that and tells more of their stories. So it starts here with one of those stories. The townhouse on High Seas Court in the Cove Village development in the Baltimore suburb of Essex was not exactly the Cape Cod retreat that its address implied. It was a small unit looking onto a parking lot. The windows of its 2 bedrooms so high and narrow that a child would have had to stand on a chair to see out of them. But to Camilla Warren, who moved into the townhouse in 2004, it was a refuge and a far cry from the East Baltimore neighborhood where she grew up. I mean, There were bunny rabbits all hopping around, she told me recently. It's Alec McGillis that she told. Well, everybody likes bunny rabbits, right? In the townhouse next door lived an older woman with whom Warren became friendly, even doing her grocery shopping once in a while. But over the course of a few months, the woman started acting strangely. She began accosting Warren's visitors. She shouted through the walls during the day, and at night she banged on the wall right where Warren kept the bassinet in which her third child slept, waking him up. Warren sent a letter reporting the problem to the complex's property manager, a company called Sawyer Realty Holdings. Simple enough, right? When there was no response, she decided to move out. In January of 2010, she submitted the requisite form giving 2 months' notice that she was transferring her Section 8 voucher. That's a federal low-income subsidy that helps her pay the rent, and transferring that voucher elsewhere. The complex's on-site manager signed the form a week later, checking the line that read, quote, "The tenant gave notice in accordance with the lease," unquote. All on the up and up. So Warren was startled in January 2013, 3 years later, when she received a summons from a private process server informing her that she was being sued for $3,014.08 by the owner of Cove Village. The lawsuit filed in Maryland District Court was doubly bewildering. It claimed she owed the money for having left in advance of her lease's expiration, though she had received written permission to leave. And the company suing her was not Sawyer, but one whose name she didn't recognize. You will, though. Only because we've talked about this LLC stuff. JK2 Westminster LLC. JK. They're also clever with their LLCs. Warren was raising 3 children alone while taking classes for a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration, and she disregarded the summons at first. Not wise, but she did do it. But JK2 Westminster's lawyers persisted. 2 more summonses followed. In April 2014, she appeared without a lawyer at a district court hearing. She told the judge about the approval for her move, but she didn't have a copy of the form the manager had signed. That's why you need a lawyer, maybe to remind you that you need these things. But who wants to spend money to hire a lawyer? You think you're in the right. I got the paperwork and everything. Of course, it would help to bring it, but okay. The judge ruled against Warren, awarding JK2 Westminster the full sum it was seeking, plus court costs, attorney's fees, and interest that brought the judgment to nearly $5,000. And the judge isn't wrong here. If you don't have the paperwork, he's not going to, right? But terrible, but that's kind of the way it had to go. There was no way Warren, who was working as a home health aide, was going to be able to pay such a sum. I was so desperate, she said. If the case was confounding to Warren, it was not unique. $5,000. Jared Kushner, billionaire, $5,000 he's suing. Right? He probably could drop that in a bar tab without noticing. But, okay. Hundreds like it have been filed over the last 5 years by JK Westminster. JK2, JK2 Westminster, and affiliated businesses in the state of Maryland alone, where the company owns some 8,000 apartments and townhouses. Nor was JK2 Westminster quite as anonymous as its opaque name suggested. It was a subsidiary of a large New York real estate firm called Kushner Companies, which was led by a young man whose initials happened to be JK, Jared Kushner. Now, interesting too, right? It's time for us to move to Washington, D.C. because my father-in-law is the president. What are we going to do for a place to stay? Well, like you and me, we go like, I own 8,000 apartments in the area. We'll move into one of those for free. No, we need to rent a $15 million a month or whatever the heck it is. What did they decide? 150? I don't know how much they're paying per month. Got to rent this, I'm a fabulous house. They live in the lap of luxury, and it might be ridiculous to believe that they would move into one of their apartments, true, but only because they're billionaires. Of course, they're only billionaires because they steal it $5,000 at a time from these other folks. When Americans were introduced last year to Ivanka Trump's husband and the nation's prospective son-in-law-in-chief, it was as the preternaturally poised, Harvard-educated scion of a real estate empire whose glittering ambitions resembled Donald Trump's own. In 2007, Kushner Companies, run at the time by Jared and his father, Charles, bought the aluminum-clad skyscraper at 666, remember that one? 5th Avenue for a record-breaking $1.8 billion. They are now seeking partners for a $12 billion plan to replace it with a glass tower that would be 40 stories taller. In 2013, they acquired 17 buildings in Manhattan's East Village for about $130 million, and 3 years later, they spent $715 million on a cluster of buildings owned by the Jehovah's Witnesses on prime land in Brooklyn's fast-developing Dumbo district. I can't believe there is a district called the Dumbo district. That is a tough sell, I would think, but okay. But the Kushner's empire, like Trump's, was underwritten by years of dealing in much more modestly ambitioned properties. Jared's grandfather, Joseph Kushner, a Holocaust survivor from Belarus, over his lifetime built a small construction company in New Jersey into a real estate venture that owned and managed some 4,000 low-rise units concentrated in the suburbs of Newark. After taking over the business, Charles expanded Kushner Company's holdings to commercial and industrial spaces, but the company's bread and butter remained the North Jersey apartment complexes bequeathed to him by his father. In the mid-2000s, the company began to sell off more than 25,000 multifamily rental units it owned, culminating in a 2007 sale of nearly 17,000 units for $1.9 billion. The sale, near the peak of the housing boom, just months before the crash, was impeccably timed, but it also reflected a shift in the attentions of what would soon be a 3-generation real estate dynasty. That's dynasty for those of you listening in the UK. Charles, a major Democratic Party donor, had returned late the previous year from a brief stint in federal prison after pleading guilty to 18 counts of tax evasion, witness tampering, and illegal campaign donations. We've heard that story. But back at the helm of his company, he began to shift its focus from New Jersey to New York City, like Trump did in his day, except from outer boroughs of New York, and prepared to pass the reins to his son, Jared, who had just received a degree in law and business from New York University. But amid the high-profile Manhattan and Brooklyn purchases in 2011, Kushner Companies, with Jared now more firmly in command, pulled together a deal that looked much more like something from the firm's humble past than from its high-rolling present. That June, the company and its equity partners bought 4,681 units of what are known in real estate jargon as distress-ridden Class B apartment complexes. Units whose prices fell somewhere in the middle of the market, typically of a certain age and wear, whose owners were in financial difficulty. The properties were spread across 12 cities in 12 sites in Toledo, Ohio, Pittsburgh, and other Rust Belt cities still reeling from the Great Recession. Kushner had to settle more than 200 debts held against the complexes before the deal could go through. At one complex in Pittsburgh, circumstances had become so dire that some residents had been left without heat and power because the previous owner couldn't pay the bills. Prudential, which was foreclosing on the portfolio, sold it for only $72 million, half the value of the mortgages on the properties. In the following months, Kushner Companies bought another 1,700 multifamily units in similar markets, according to the trade publication Multifamily Executive. You believe there is such a publication? I mean, come on. Unlike the company's big New York investments, the complexes were not acquired with an eye toward appreciation. These were not growing markets, after all, but toward producing a steady cash flow. Our goal is to keep buying and incrementally growing. They're good markets where you can get yield, Jared Kushner told Multifamily Executive in October 2011, predicting that the net income for the year's purchases would be $14 million within a year. The complexes buttressed the Kushner portfolio in another way, he said. They would serve as a hedge against an upswing in inflation he believed was looming on the horizon. A year later, in August 2012, a Kushner-led investment group bought 5,500 multifamily units in the Baltimore area with $371 million in financing from Freddie Mac, the government-backed mortgage lender, another considerable bargain. 2 years later, Kushner Companies picked up 3 more complexes in the Baltimore area for $37.9 million. Today, Westminster Management, Kushner Companies' property management arm, lists 34 complexes under its control in Maryland, Ohio, and New Jersey with a total of close to 20,000 units. Kushner's largest concentration of multifamily units is in the Baltimore area, where the company controls 15 complexes in all, which, if you assume 3 residents per unit, could be home to more than 20,000 people. All but 2 of the complexes are in suburban Baltimore County, but they are only suburban in the most literal sense. They sit along arterial shopping strips or highways, yet they are easy to miss. The Highland Village complex, for example, is beside the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, but the tall sound barriers dividing it from the 6-lane highway render its more than 1,000 units invisible to the thousands traveling that route every day. The complexes date mostly from the 1960s and 70s, when white flight from the city was creating a huge demand for affordable housing in Baltimore County. They were meant to exude middle-class respectability, unglamorous, but safe and pleasant enough, a renter's Levittown. Since then, however, they have slipped socioeconomically, along with the middle class itself, into the vast gray area of the modern precariat. Home to casino workers, distribution warehouse pickers, Uber drivers, students at for-profit colleges. Although most of the tenants I met in a recent series of visits to the complexes pay their own rent, ranging from about $800 to $1,300, some of them receive Section 8 assistance, as Camilla Warren did. Baltimore County has no public housing for a population of more than 825,000, so these and similar complexes have become the de facto substitute. At the time of the 2012 Baltimore purchase, Kushner raved about the promise of the low-end multifamily market. It's proven over the last few years to be the most resilient asset class, and at the end of the day, it's a very stable asset class, he told multifamily executive. He said things were proceeding well in the Midwestern complexes he purchased a year earlier. It was a lot of construction and a lot of evictions, he said, but the community now looks great, and the outcome has been phenomenal. Lots of evictions, though. Camilla Warren still had not paid the $4,984.37 judgment against her by late 2014. Back to that story. 3 days before Christmas that year, Westminster filed a request to garnish her wages from her in-home elder care job. 5 days earlier, Warren had gone to court to fill out a handwritten motion saying she had proof that she was given permission to leave Cove Village in 2010. She had finally managed to get a copy from the housing department. Please give me the opportunity to plead my case, she wrote, but she did not attach a copy of the form to her motion, not realizing it was necessary, so a judge denied it on January 9th on the grounds that there was, quote, no evidence submitted. I'm sure that drove her crazy. And you know what? It would drive Trump crazy, too. And his lawyers would, his lawyers would know, even if they somehow screwed up, they would know how to get some kind of continuance and be able to, amend their filing. I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but, to somebody who's been through law school, it is obvious. Somebody else who says, I needed, if they see on Judge Judy or something or the People's Court, they say, I want a chance to plead my case. That's the day I show up, and that's the day I'll bring a copy of the form. Right? But, once you have a copy, you can make lots of other copies. You might as well just give it right over to the judge. But she didn't. So the garnishing started that month. Warren was in the midst of leaving her job, but JK2 Westminster garnished her bank account too. After her account was zeroed out, a loss of about $900, she borrowed money from her mother to buy food for her children and pay her bills. That February, 5 years after she left Cove Village, 5 years after she left, Warren returned to court, this time with the housing form in hand, asking the judge to halt garnishment. I am a single mom of 3, and my bank account was wiped clean by the plaintiff, she pleaded in another handwritten request. I cannot take care of my kids when they snatch all of my money out of my account. I do not feel I owe this money. Please have mercy on my family and I. She told me that when she called the law office representing JK2 Westminster that same day from the courthouse to discuss the case, one of the lawyers told her, this is not going to go away. You will pay us. The judge denied Warren's request without explanation, and JK2 Westminster kept pressing for the rest of the money, sending out one process server after another to present Warren with legal papers. Finally, in January 2016, the court sent notice of a $4,615 lien against Warren, a legal claim against her for the remaining judgment. Warren began to cry as she recounted the episode to me. She said the lien has greatly complicated her hopes of taking out a loan to start her own small assisted living center. She had gone a couple of years without a bank account for fear of further garnishing. It was just pure greed, she said. It was unnecessary. I asked why she hadn't pushed harder against the judgment once she had the necessary evidence in hand. They know how to work this stuff, she replied. They know what to do, and here I am. I don't know anything about the law. I would have to hire a lawyer or something, and I really can't afford that. I really don't know my rights. I don't know all the court lingo. I knew that up against them, I would lose. So here's a job that can't be created, a small business that can't be started, somebody who can't even take care of her, paying her bills without paying exorbitant fees to everybody else because she's unbanked, as we like to say, not because there isn't a bank available, but because she can't open a bank account or Kushner will steal all the money that's in it. A search for JK2 Westminster, by the way, in the database of Maryland's district court system brings back 548 cases in which it is the plaintiff, and that does not include hundreds of other cases that have been filed in the name of the company's individual complexes. A vast majority of these cases have been filed by a single small law firm in the Baltimore suburb of Owings Mills. The law office of Jeffrey Tapper specializes in, quote, collections work with an emphasis on landlord-tenant cases. In other words, suing poor people. It has represented several other real estate management companies, including Sawyer, which retains a stake in many of the Kushner complexes. In April, I drove to Owings Mills in hopes of speaking to Tapper. As I waited for him by reception, I overheard an assistant making a call about a new case, saying that the firm would continue to pursue one tenant even if the other person on the lease had filed for bankruptcy. Tapper emerged, a man in his mid-60s with white hair, a paunch, and a large smartphone clipped to his belt. Our interview was brief. I'm not having any conversation with you that has to do with one of my clients, he said. I'm not helping you with any of whatever you're trying to do. In the cases that Tapper has brought to court on behalf of JK2 Westminster and individual Kushner-controlled companies, there is a clear pattern of Kushner companies pursuing tenants over virtually any unpaid rent or broken lease, even in the numerous cases where the facts appear to be on the tenant's side. Not only does the company file cases against them, it pursues the cases for as long as it takes to collect from the overmatched defendants, often several years. And I guess here we'll just pause to remind everybody, yes, they file suit even when the evidence is available, is considerably in favor of the tenant and against them, because they know that if they file suit, 99 out of 100 of these tenants will decline to hire a lawyer and will lose on technical grounds because they don't know what they're doing. Whereas if they had legal representation, they would win those cases. It's just that they can't afford it, and that's what this guy knows. And he preys on it, and he files these suits, and he wins $5,000 at a time, and it comes in drips and drabs through garnishment of wages and bank accounts, and he takes a percentage of that, and that's how he makes his living. And that's how Kushner, doing this to 1,000 people at once, is maintaining his fortune. In addition to collecting all these rents, he's collecting rents from people who are in the buildings, and he's collecting rents from people who used to be in the buildings for years afterwards. It's just worth doing. He's not entitled to the money, and he wouldn't win in a fair world, but that's not where we are. We're in this crap world instead, where he knows that he can squeeze people for $5,000 and stretch it out with interest payments on that, above and beyond that, because they're not going to be able to pay to get a lawyer, and nobody's going to be able to afford to pay to get a lawyer. And how do you even, you're going to have $10,000 in legal expenses to save yourself a $5,000 judgment. But that's your only option because you can't pay the $5,000. Sit there and pay $5,000 plus interest and have headaches for 10 years. Whew. It is rather amazing. I mean, on the one hand, he's entitled to these payments. On the other hand, no, he's not. It's amazingly, of course, now, interestingly, he's working in the administration and doing everything he can to eliminate any possible federal program that would even have any remote chance of helping low-income tenants fight these things for an affordable rate. So, fantastic for him, I'm sure. So, where were we here? Not only does the company file cases against these people, even when the facts appear to be on the tenant's side, they tell them they'll pursue it for as long as it takes. The court docket of JK2 Westminster's case against Warren, for instance, spans more than 3 years and 112 actions, for a sum that amounts to maybe 2 days' worth of billings for the average corporate law firm associate, from a woman who never even rented from JK2 Westminster. The pursuit is all the more remarkable given how transient the company's prey tends to be. Hounding former tenants for money means paying to send out process servers who often report back that they were unable to locate the target. This does not deter Kushner Company's lawyers. They send the servers back out again a few months later. In March 2009, Joan Beverly, a probation agent, signed the lease for her daughter, Lenatea, I'm guessing at the pronunciation there, for a unit at Dutch Village, a complex on the northern edge of Baltimore. Lenatea moved out a year later, several months before her lease was up. Kushner Companies bought Dutch Village more than 2 years later. In December 2012, JK2 Westminster filed suit in Baltimore County District Court against Beverly, seeking $3,810.16. Several months of rent it said it was owed, plus about $1,000 in repair costs, including $10 for failure to return laundry room card. Mind you, they bought this unit after this woman was long gone, but they searched the records looking for who can we sue. If we can file a suit for enough money against somebody, maybe they'll just pay it, or maybe we can just live off of the interest and garnishment. Wow. That February, Lenatea, and again, I'm not certain I'm pronouncing it right. Your best guess at Lennettea? All right. Anyway, she filed a written court notice explaining that her mother, who was dying of pancreatic cancer, and we'll remove her health insurance too while we're at it, was in terminal hospice care and is not eligible to work. She added, by way of supporting evidence, a letter from the hospice provider to Joan Beverly's bank explaining her and her husband's late mortgage payments on their home. There has been added financial stress because Mrs. Beverly is very ill at this time. But JK2 Westminster persisted in seeking a hearing on the suit. In March, a district court judge found in favor of the company a total judgment against Joan of more than $5,500. Joan died 2 weeks later. Her husband, Tyrone Beverly, a retired longshoreman, requested that the judgment against his deceased wife be removed, but was denied. The case remains open on the court database. Tyrone, who was married to Joan for 32 years, told me that he had assumed the judgment had been dismissed and was unaware that it was still listed as awaiting payment. They just didn't treat us fair, he said. The sweeping nature of the company's pursuit of tenants was most evident when those tenants were, in fact, prepared to defend themselves. Shawanda Howe, I guess, maybe, H-O-U-G-H, Howe, moved out of her unit in the Carriage Hill complex in the northwestern Baltimore suburb of Randallstown in early 2012 after black mold worsened her son's asthma, landing him in the hospital twice, right? You gotta get out of there. After the maintenance crew tried and failed to fix the problem, she got the rental office's written permission to move out in advance of her lease. But then Kushner Companies bought Carriage Hill, and a year and a half later, in August 2013, JK2 Westminster filed a lawsuit against Howe, seeking $4,068.53. She fought back. In a court filing, she said that she had kept all of her documentation, that the company had assured her that it had not lost a dime in rent. She had gone so far as to coordinate the time of her departure with the arrival of a new tenant. JK2 Westminster went ahead with a hearing before a judge a month later, but the judge ultimately found for Howe. There we go, finally. Cases like Howe's, however, were the exception rather than the rule. Overall, about 9 out of every 10 cases brought by JK2 Westminster that I surveyed resulted in judgments against the defendants, who often did not appear in person for the hearings, and if they did, almost never had legal representation. How could it possibly be worth Kushner Companies' while to pursue hundreds of people so aggressively over a few $1,000s here and there? Well, it adds up. After all, the pursuit itself costs money, and it wasn't happening in just Baltimore. Doug Wilkins, a lawyer in Toledo who has represented some of the complexes bought here by Kushner, told me the company is seeking far more monetary judgments than did previous owners. When I presented JK2 Westminster's record of litigation to Matthew Seifer, a Georgetown University business professor who used to work for the real estate giant Invesco, he said it was highly unusual to put so much effort into pursuing former tenants in court. These people fade into the shadows of the night, he said. I don't know if I like that sound of that dismissal, but okay, geez. That's what he said. It's amazing to me that there's that much to go after. Brian Pendergraft, an attorney in Greenbelt, Maryland, who works on both sides of the landlord-tenant litigation, had told me he'd heard of large property management companies pursuing former tenants for unpaid rent, but not going so far as to pursue tenants who predated the company's ownership of a complex. I guess you can do it, he said, but I don't think it's cool. Well, it isn't cool, but I'm not even certain that you can do it. I guess, depending on the purchase agreement, if you're a successor in interest to the landlord that you take over for, just because they, didn't pursue these claims doesn't necessarily waive a new owner's right to pursue them. But maybe that, honestly, that's probably a good piece of legislation right there. You just say, now, successors in interest, have, I don't know, if you wanted to compromise, you could say you got 90 days from the date of purchase to file and try and minimize some of this stuff. There's no reason why they should be able to pursue damages that they didn't suffer. Presumably that was baked into the cost of the purchase. These other people were selling at fire sale prices because they were distressed because they'd already absorbed the losses. And most likely, by the way, had taken tax deductions in the amount of those losses. And now Kushner is basically collecting on money that the previous owners were already reimbursed for on their taxes. So that ain't too cool either. But apparently nobody's focusing on that one. I might be wrong about that. Maybe that's why nobody's focusing on it. But Matthew Hertz will continue with this story, whose Bethesda, Maryland firm represents landlords and tenants in similar cases, explained to me that there is a logic behind such aggressive tactics. The costs of the pursuit are not as high as you might imagine, he said. People are not that hard to find in the age of cell phones and easily accessible databases. If I give my process server a name and a phone number, it's generally enough to trace you, he said. If I have a date of birth and a social security number, it's even easier. These legal costs can be billed to the defendant as attorney's fees in the terms the leases allow. And garnishing wages is relatively easy to do by court order, assuming the defendant has wages to garnish. So just to reemphasize here, we'll go over this and make it clearer since I garbled it. It's not that expensive to try to find people after all, as it turns out. B, the costs of finding you is part of the attorney's fees. When they sue you for the lost or for the back rent, they also are suing you for attorney's fees, and that just ends up coming out of your pocket. So the money that they spent trying to find you gets reimbursed in the suit, if they can, A, win the suit, and B, garnish those wages, if they can get a hold of you, if you've got any money to take. So it pays for itself, even though, again, it's already been paid for by taxpayers, but okay. Anyway, as for pursuing former tenants for years before the new company's, ownership of a complex, Hertz said it was hardly different from investors buying a portfolio of mortgages. It's debt to be collected on. If you buy someone's properties, you're buying their debts, not just their assets. That's true. But you're also paying less for their assets because of those debts. You take the good with the bad and try to collect on the bad. Even if you get back only 5%, you're making something. He said, I'm buying up this property, and if I can collect anything, it's gravy on top. And that's true. It's just terrible for America. There was, Hertz added, an ancillary benefit to such relentless pursuit, sending a message to current tenants. One way to make sure that tenants are paying their rent and to keep them from breaking leases early, which brings with it the costs and hassles of having to clean apartments and find new tenants, which you're going to have anyway when the lease ends, is to instill a sense of fear about violating a lease. Any landlord takes that into account, Hertz said. They know tenants are going to talk to each other. If they say, he's going to come after you, it's deterrence. Of course, you can't hear that story from people who have left years prior, but I guess news can get back. When Kushner Companies finally responded to my questions about the cases, they essentially affirmed Hertz's reasoning. As manager for the Baltimore complexes, the company had a fiduciary obligation, they say. Interesting. The rest of the Trump agenda is about freeing everybody else from every other fiduciary obligation that might help people. But they have a fiduciary obligation to its ownership partners to collect as much revenue as it could, maximizing shareholder value, right? Said Kushner Company's chief financial officer, Jennifer McLean, in a written response. She said the company's legal costs have been minimal compared with what it seeks to recover. McLean declined to comment on several cases, including Camille Warren's, but she said the pursuit of Joan Beverly, the woman dying of cancer, was justified. This tenant owed the landlord $3,819.16, she said in a written statement. As property manager, it's our job to collect rent payments. In general, Westminster management only takes legal action against the tenant when absolutely necessary, McLean said. If legal action is pursued, however, the company follows guidelines consistent with industry standards. She added, while taking a tenant to court is far from an ideal outcome, that option and clear rules governing it must exist as a last resort. The Highland Village complex, along the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, is one of Kushner Company's largest, a vast maze of lanes and courts filled with rows of short brick and siding fronted homes. Like the other Kushner complexes I visited in Baltimore's southern and eastern suburbs, it is situated in what was once a predominantly white working class community within reasonable commuting distance of the harbor and industrial plants now defunct, like Bethlehem Steel. In recent decades, many black transplants from the city and Hispanic immigrants have arrived as well, and Highland Village is an unusually integrated place. The complex, like others I saw, seemed designed to preclude neighborliness. Most of the townhouses lack even the barest stoop to sit out on, and at least one complex has signs forbidding ball playing. Violators will be prosecuted, it says. Wow. At another complex, kids had drawn a rectangle on the side of a storage shed in lieu of a hoop for their basketball game. The only meeting points at many of the complexes are the metal mailbox stands, the dumpsters, and the laundry room. For some reason, they've capitalized the dumpsters in this. Okay. I don't think they meant to do that. And the only thing that united many of the residents I spoke to, it seemed, was resentment of their landlord, which is probably why there's no meeting spaces or places to assemble. Okay. They complained about Westminster management's aggressive rent collection practices, which many told me exceeded what they had experienced under the previous owners. Rent is marked officially late, they said, if it arrives after 4:30 p.m. on the 5th day of the month. Got to have a bright line somewhere, I guess. But Westminster recently made paying the rent much more of a challenge. Last fall, it sent notice to residents saying that they could no longer pay by money order, on which many residents who lack checking accounts had relied, and at the complex's rental office, and would instead need to go to a Walmart or Ace Cash Express and use an assigned WIPS card, a plastic card linked to the resident's account, to pay their rent there. That method carries a $3.50 fee for every payment, and getting to the Walmart or Ace is difficult for many residents without cars. Wow. This is reminiscent of getting paid minimum wage at McDonald's with a debit card, a percentage of which goes to the bank and a percentage of which gets kicked back to the employer, too. Amazing. I wonder if there's any kickback involved here. Tenants who pay after the 5th are hit with late fees that start around $40 to $50 and escalate from there, with court fees usually added on as well. What upsets residents most, though, are not the fees themselves, but that the property managers, instead of putting pink or yellow late notices and court summonses discreetly in mailboxes or under doors, post them in public, on the front doors of townhouse units or on lobby walls or lobby doors of apartment buildings. This bothered even tenants who said they always pay their rent on time. The whole neighborhood knows, said Marquita Parmalee, a truck driver who pays $1,010 a month to rent a townhouse at Essex Park near Cove Village. Derek Cromwell, a retiree living at Carriage Hill, told me they put them in the windows for everybody to see your business. That's not right. You don't put people's business out like that. Compounding these grievances was Westminster's maintenance of the properties, or lack thereof. Their complexes comprise hundreds of units, but typically have only 4 or so workers looking after them. Alicia Jameson, a 30-year-old Highland Village resident, invited me into the small living room of the $842 a month townhouse she and her fiancé share with her 2 children. The room was cluttered with bags from Walmart and Dollar Tree, ketchup packets, and supplies for the work Jameson took up after she lost her cashier's job at Walmart for missing too many shifts for parenting duties, making personalized tote bags and gift baskets for weddings. Jameson showed me 3 large holes in the walls of the townhouse, which Westminster charged her and her fiancé, Keith Riggs, $150 to fix in October, but had not yet been repaired. Every time I ask about drywall, they say, "Oh, well, we only have one drywall person." Riggs told me there was also black mold spreading around the bathtub, a large brown stain and a crack on the wall adjacent to the stove, and a gap in the bathroom skylight that allowed in rain and snow. Jameson told me that the refrigerator hadn't worked for more than a month before being replaced. I know about that one. Her family had lived on canned food and boxed milk. Complaints about poor upkeep abounded at other complexes too. At Highland Village, there was the matter of the vacant unit that burned down one night a couple of months ago. Its shell was still standing, attended by nothing but plywood and tarp. At Essex Park, east of the city, Marketa Parmalee, the truck driver, told me that she had a mouse infestation that was severe enough that her 12-year-old daughter recently found one in her bed. Yeah. Parmalee also has a 2-year-old with asthma, which is aggravated by allergens and mice droppings. Very dangerous, really. She moved her own bed and other furniture away from the walls to dissuade mice, kept the family's laundry in tote bags after mice started appearing in the hamper, and vacuumed twice a day. Her neighbor told me it took weeks for staff members to replace a rear window that had been shot out by kids with a BB gun. At the Carroll Park complex in Middle River, Maryland, Jen Jackson showed me a ceiling leak that was causing mold problems. At the Whispering Woods townhouses nearby, a resident named Nicole, who asked me that I not use her last name, told me she had filed unheeded complaints about loose plastic shutters, one of which finally fell off and hit her in the head. When I visited Nicole again a few weeks later, she told me that Westminster staff had scolded her for speaking with me and told her not to do so again. A large black pickup followed me and a photographer as we walked through the complex until we left. In the same complex, Renee Cook showed me the large swath of her downstairs ceiling that had collapsed and the mold and mildew beneath the carpet, resulting from a leak of her neighbor's illicit washer-dryer. He asked about such conditions. Kushner Company said it follows industry standards for maintenance staffing and exterminator visits, and that its partners had spent $10 million on upgrades across the complexes. Despite those improvements, issues still arise given the age of the properties, said McLean, the chief financial officer. Shortly after I put questions to the company about specific tenants' complaints, Cook's ceiling was repaired. Well, that's good. The worst troubles may have been those described in a 2013 court case involving Jasmine Cox's unit at Cove Village. They began with the bedroom ceiling, which started leaking one day. Then maggots started coming out of the living room carpet. Then raw sewage started flowing out of the kitchen sink. It sounded like someone turned a pool upside down, Cox told me. I heard the water hitting the floor and I got panicked. I got into bed and the sink is black and gray and it's pooling out of the sink and the house smells terrible. Yeesh. Cox stopped cooking for herself and her son, not wanting food near the sink. A judge allowed her reduced rent for 1 month. When she moved out soon afterward, Westminster Management sent her a $600 invoice for a new carpet and other repairs. Cox, who's now working as a battery test engineer and about to buy her first home, was unaware who was behind the company that had put her through such an ordeal. When I told her of Kushner's involvement, there was a silence as she took it in. "Get that expletive out of here," she said. Very few of the complex residents I met, even ones who had been pursued at length in court by JK2 Westminster, had any idea that their rent and late fees were going to the family company of the president's son-in-law. That Jared Kushner? Danny Jackson, a plumber in his 15th year living at Harbor Point Estates, exclaimed. Estates. You like that one? Oh my God. And I thought he was the good one. Now we're talking. Jackson said he voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Many of the others I spoke with had not voted in that or any other election. I'm not a big political person, so I feel like I don't think I should vote on something I don't know anything about. Alicia Jameson told me. But eastern Baltimore County was a Trump stronghold, a formerly staunch Democratic territory with many downwardly mobile white voters, and Kushner's complexes were no exception. Now that's something, there's no meeting places, of course, but that's some good stuff to do canvassing. And do you know your jerk-ass landlord is Jared Kushner? Wow. Well, that might not have worked quite as well before, but maybe now. East of the city, I met Chris Freimiller, a 38-year-old resident of the company's Morningside Park complex who was smoking Newports in his car before heading to work at Rite Aid distribution centers. Freimiller complained to me about the persistent leak from the toilet and the ceiling damage it had caused, and about being hit repeatedly with late fees. He told me he voted for president for the first time ever last year for Donald Trump. His vote, he said, was motivated by the racial and police issues, how bad it got with Obama, and how he seemed to promote the cop bashing and the racial divide. Did knowing that he was sending his late fees to Trump's son-in-law change anything? Yeah, actually, he said. As if they need any more money. Yeah, that's right. Populism. It's so great what he's doing for you guys. At the Carroll Park complex, I met Mike McHarg, a private investigator, and his girlfriend, Patricia Howell. They're nothing but slumlords, Howell told me of Westminster Management. They take everyone's money. When I asked if they knew who was behind the company, they said they did not. Oh, really? Howell said when I mentioned Kushner. Said, oh, really? And I'm a Trump supporter. Of course, most people didn't know that. I know this is a great thing to expose them to that. And it's funny too, because, they all thought that Trump, it's amazing how many people thought Trump was going to do something for them directly, like immediately. And there really is something that he could do immediately. Jared Kushner could solve all these people's problems today, but he doesn't because he wants to be rich with their money. Jared Kushner stepped down as chief executive of Kushner Companies in January. Oh, so I guess he can't do anything anymore. Dang, darn it. He's got no control of it. But he remains a stakeholder in the company. Ooh, stakeholder. That's nice. His share of company-related trusts is estimated to be worth at least $600 million, so he's a shareholder. And the company says it has no intention of selling off its multifamily holdings. JK2 Westminster was formally dissolved in December, but Kushner Company still owns the complexes through other entities, of course, JK3, probably. Lawsuits against tenants are now typically filed in the names of the complexes themselves. Because Kushner retains his interest in the complexes, the White House told the Baltimore Sun in February that he would recuse himself from any policy decisions about Section 8 funding, as many of his tenants rely on it for their rent. In other words, he's on the dole. But even as Kushner now busies himself with his ever-expanding White House portfolio, his company is carrying on its vigorous efforts in court. On April 17th, 3 cases were being held consecutively in Baltimore's district court involving tenants of the Dutch Village complex. One was against Catherine Silver, a Morgan State University student who had given notice that she was moving at the end of March. She was fed up with lousy maintenance, among other things, a perpetually clogged toilet and a ceiling leak in her closet. But when Silver went to Walmart to pay her March rent with her WIPS WHIPS card, the money mistakenly ended up not in the account for Dutch Village, but the one for Kushner Company's adjacent complex, Pleasant View. Westminster Management started eviction proceedings. On March 23rd, a sheriff's deputy changed the locks on the unit. Silver was traveling at the time. It was spring break, and it was not until March 31st that she was able to explain to a judge what happened and get her keys back. By that point, it was too late to get her possessions into the moving truck she'd rented, and classes had resumed. She stayed in the unit in which Westminster had turned off the heat and hot water, trying again to plan for her departure. But Westminster was now after her for April's rent, despite the fact that the company had literally barred her from being able to move before April, as she had intended. On April 25th, a judge ruled that she needed to pay half of April's rent. Total court costs, plus court costs, $471. Westminster had a lawyer from Tapper's firm, Andrew Rabinowitz, at the April 25th hearing, which lasted for more than 3 hours, all over less than $500. The next day, Rabinowitz was back to defend Westminster against Silver's criminal complaint over the unfounded eviction. This time, he was more accommodating, perhaps because he realized a reporter was present. After conferring with Dutch Village's property manager, who was also in attendance, Rabinowitz agreed to let Silver have until the end of the month of May to move out rent-free, as long as she paid for April. Silver asked if she could have her hot water turned back on. He said he'd look into it. But when I visited Silver 2 weeks later, the hot water was still off. The stove was covered with pots she was using to boil water for bathing. On May 10th, at the Highland Village complex, a woman who was distributing the yellow failure to pay rent notices filed with the district court to tenants who were behind on their May rent. One went up on the door of a man who introduced himself to me as Tommy, a recently divorced house painter with 2 children, who was at that moment sitting in his pickup truck reading Psalm 91 to gird himself for a visit to traffic court. He said he didn't know why he kept being hit with the late fees and court fees at Highland Village because he was up to date on the rent itself. Over at Carroll Park, Mike McHarg, the private investigator, had also received a yellow notice and was trying to find out when he needed to come up with the money to avoid eviction. So was Chris Miller, the Rite Aid worker. He had missed a couple weeks of work with back pain related to a metal bar in his leg from an earlier car accident. Things pile up on people, man. And Westminster management had moved quickly to file for eviction over $722.09 in missing rent, plus $66 in fees. When I arrived, Miller was sleeping on the couch after a night shift, and his wife, Jacqueline Mader, was trying to get an eviction date from the constable while their 11-year-old son Ethan looked on. One more yellow notice was affixed at the Highland Park home of Alicia Jamison, the wedding basket maker. Her fiancé had left his job as a casino housekeeper to take a job handling Amazon packages near the airport. But his first check hadn't come through yet. Jamison was working at Walmart again. The couple's car tags had expired, so both were enduring long public transit commutes. No one had come from maintenance. There were still 3 holes in the wall. So that wraps up the story of slumlord Jason Kushner, just to give you an idea of where this guy's coming from. There is, of course, the entire look into things over by ProPublica. I should just take a quick look at that one. Is that the same one? Yeah, I think it is, as a matter of fact. So it's they're just, I guess, running. I don't know. I guess they must have worked together on that one. Alec McGillis, I don't know whether he's a ProPublica guy, I guess so. And the New York Times, as part of their consortium, picked that story up. So it's not additional stories, it's the same stories. Just thought I'd point that one out there. I held out some hope that there was even more out there. And that is not even the biggest story. That's, of course, never going to reach the level of interest in the federal probes. They're likely not going to be taking any look at that unless somehow they can connect the money that went into the purchase of these units to some of the bigger deals that Kushner was pulling with the Russian banks. But there's a lot there too. And what we really need to do next, though there won't be time for it, but perhaps that's something we could pursue next week, is take a look at the dealings that Kushner has had on higher levels that are leading investigators to wonder whether there weren't financial crimes of various kinds going on in the Kushner businesses and the Kushner-Trump nexus. Is there any way we can give you a nice taste of that quickly before we get out of here? Well, probably not. It's getting too damn close to the end of the show, and time instead to tell you what's coming up next. In the world of news roundups over on the after show, they'll be taking care of all the other things that are still in the news and still in the headlines that you'll need to know for the weekend, but which we set aside just for the purposes of setting the table on what kind of guy this Jared Kushner really is. Of course, they'll be investigating him on bigger, badder kinds of money laundering stories and weirdo sweetheart deals and loans from banks outside of the country that no one else inside the country would have been likely to make. But I thought this was important context just in terms of figuring out what kind of guy we're really dealing with here and exactly how petty he is and exactly how much of a flashy real estate billionaire's fortune really comes from squeezing blood from some very miserable stones out there. It really is amazing. I guess if you own that many apartment units and you're willing to go that far, and I guess you just basically it comes down to this: you just make claims for anything. I mean, here's this one of the things that really stood out that didn't get enough attention. I'll call it out here now. Do you remember that one unit that had the leaks, the sewage, I think it was, that was backing up in the sink, right? And it overflows and it flows onto the floor and it stains the carpet. They charged her for that carpet. I mean, she didn't do anything to have this happen, but they're charging her for new carpet. Now, she may go, in a regular world where you have enough money to be represented by counsel, you go to the court proceedings on this thing and say, we're not paying for that carpet. That's on you. This maintenance of this is your responsibility. We told you about this leak. She didn't do anything that would cause sewage to back up in her sink. And it overflowed because you guys haven't maintained the sewage pipes there, and it stained the carpet as a result in a unit she doesn't own. That's your responsibility, replacing that carpet. You can't bill her for that carpet. But they did it anyway because they know that there's no chance or very little chance that any of these people are going to get counsel who are competent at all, if they can get anybody, or, they're not going to think to represent themselves this way. Most people, when they're sued, they don't think it's their fault for these things, but they just don't know how to express that or how to document it in a way that a court is going to recognize and be able to rule in their favor. And that's the game. That's how this works. They know that they're really not entitled to collect this money, but they become entitled to collect this money. Entitlement. Isn't that an interesting thing? They become entitled to collect this money because they know not that they have a real legal right to it, but that they can create a legal right to it by showing up in court and with minimally competent counsel, being able to sweep aside the claims of the defendants in these cases because they simply don't know what they're doing or how to do it. 9 times out of 10, no matter what they claim, the defense is not going to be competent to dispense with the claim, and it'll be added to their costs, and then they'll win the case because people either don't show up or don't show up prepared or don't know what to say to a court, and then boom, by virtue of the way the law operates, by virtue of procedure, which usually Donald Trump and his ilk hate, they will be awarded the right to collect this money, which they never had the right to before. By the way, how does that happen? Well, of course, we all know at bottom, it's the judicial system that creates these rights. And it's supposed to happen this way. It's just not supposed to be abused this way, but it gets abused this way. That's just the way it is. One of the things that we could clean up with various kinds of criminal justice and civil justice reform, yes. But I just want to bring that one up one more time to say that courts exist really for the purpose of settling these issues, settling these claims and counterclaims. They get settled in favor of the Jared Kushners of the world. The courts operate at the taxpayer expense and under taxpayer and sovereignty and the sovereignty and authority of the United States and the several states within them, and they operate for the purpose of transferring enormous, vast sums of wealth from the very poor to the very rich. That's not supposed to be what happens, but I guess I bring this up by saying this has always been my argument for progressive taxation. Why should we pay more than the percentage that, if we had a flat tax? Well, when you have these kind of assets and you're transferring those kind of assets from out of other people's pockets into yours with regularity because you know that a system is in place that will guarantee that you can make bogus claims and transform them into legitimate ones for your own profit, you need to pay rent on that. That's why we have progressive taxation in this country, and I don't think anybody should forget it.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, I had to get to that point anyway, and I'm sorry it took me so long to get around to it, so I didn't have time to tell you all the fabulous things that are coming up on the Friday edition of the After Show. But trust me, there's a lot, and it's great, and you won't want to miss it, and it's fantastic stuff, not just headlines, but deeper dives into really interesting and obscure stories. Do stay tuned. They're up next on Netroots Radio.